So Paul is Managing Director of FLC EMEA, I would say EMEA cybersecurity, and Ollie is a Senior Manager in Marketing of the same area. And I don't need to tell you their biographies because they can tell you those themselves and will do much better than me. So really, just starting from the beginning, it would be great if you could both tell us what your role is within your company. And Paul, would you like to go first on that?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, good afternoon, or good evening, rather, everybody. It's still light in the north, so that's why I slipped into the afternoon. But yeah, Paul Riley, nice to be introduced to you all. I'm Managing Director in FTI Consulting, which stands for Forensic Technologies International. It's a large multinational organisation focusing on strategic communications, crisis management, how we go about doing litigious, i.e., if anyone's got a disagreement with another firm, we go and do the actual ground truth and investigations into those organisations. And Ollie and I and the rest of the team sit in a practice called Forensic Litigation Consulting, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's exactly that. And we are in the cybersecurity team in EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, India and Africa, so a bit of a large spread, but nevertheless we've got a growing team in terms of cybersecurity team across the world. We are about 60 odd strong and growing rapidly, as this is a niche market and a growing market, and an ever evolving threat landscape means that the work is continuously always going to improve and increase in that space. So my role is to lead the practice in terms of the proactive and reactive space of cybersecurity. So that's looking at how we can stop falling into the space. I'm more secure to the ever-evolving landscape. And if they do fall into the incident space, incident response space, how we can best recover them quickly and efficiently to make sure that they as a business can respond effectively to that. So that's my role. Ollie.
Yeah, hi guys, great to speak to you this evening. So Ollie Davis, as Paul said, I look after marketing in the cybersecurity business for EMEA. So my role is pretty varied. I work very closely with the core team, including Paul, and essentially work to develop and build our brand. So on a normal day, I could be working on anything from a social media campaign promoting our services to clients, working closely with the team to develop some literature and collateral, which we might use for meetings or pitches, running activities specific to business development, and also looking at things like events and partnerships within the market space. So as Paul alluded to, we're in a bit of a growth phase at the moment. Cybersecurity is a huge, huge issue for organizations, and in many surveys within the marketplace, it comes up as the #1 issue for CEOs right now. So we are growing quickly, and we are working to build and develop our brand in this marketplace.
Cool, that's really interesting. So it'd be really interesting to understand really a potted history of your careers yourselves, because obviously you've came at it from different areas and you've moved in different areas to get where you are today. So Ollie, as you're still on there, would you want to tell us a bit of potted history of your career?
Sure, yeah. So mine's actually a bit varied. So I guess I've always had an interest in technology, and when I was a bit younger, when I was a teenager, I used to work in a bit of a random electrical shop, kind of selling computer parts and repairing things. So that always intrigued me. I then went to university and I studied business. To be honest, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that stage. But you kind of do your degree, you meet new people and you learn quite a lot. And at the end of university, well, actually at the start of the final year, it suddenly dawned on me that, oh my God, within 9 months, I'm going to be out of uni. I need to get a job. I need to find some income. And I was graduating in 2010, so the environment wasn't great following the recession. So I basically set about applying for, I think I applied for something like 75 graduate jobs because I simply needed to find something, and somehow managed to get myself a job at Marks and Spencer on their graduate scheme doing marketing. So I spent a few years at Marks and Spencer, and that's a very traditional marketing environment. It had a bit of a tech influence. So we were investing an awful lot in in-store technology, how you can evolve the kind of shopper experience, and also the kind of web platform there. So at the time, Marks and Spencer were using Amazon, and they were shifting away from that as their web platform. So I did a lot of work kind of on that and ensuring that our brand was present. After my time at M&S, I went to Lloyd's Banking Group. So I guess a bit more kind of a pure business brand, and looked after marketing there, worked on some pretty innovative TV campaigns and supported their app development. And shortly after that, I moved to the BBC. And at the BBC, I got to work on some TV campaigns, including stuff like The Apprentice, but also had a heavy focus on apps. So I was marketing the Weather app and the BBC News app, which are two of the biggest apps actually in the UK. So it was fantastic to get involved in that product development and technology. After that, I decided that I had some good consumer marketing experience, but I wanted to kind of delve further into technology, and also get some experience in the business world. So I took a role at PwC, which was in cybersecurity marketing. And initially I looked after cybersecurity marketing for the UK, and then more recently globally. And as part of that, I got to go down to Sydney for 6 months, which was really, really cool, and work with the global team, although I've kind of lost my suntan by now, which is disappointing. And at PwC, you had to work very close with the technical teams, bring propositions to life, understand the competitive landscape, work with analysts to identify where you're going to launch products and how you were going to do that in a crowded market space. And it really was a fantastic experience. Earlier this year, I was offered a role at FTI, which I couldn't turn down. And I've joined FTI at the end of March to look after their marketing for their EMEA business. So this is month, I guess, 3 for me at FTI. And
how long have you been at the office?
I've not been to the office.
Oh my God.
It was already locked down. So I did a full kind of virtual onboarding, which has actually been really awesome. And FTI have been, great with technology and ensuring that we're kind of, all kitted out and everything like that. So a bit of a weird start, but it's actually worked surprisingly well. My role at FTI, as I said, is to look after marketing for EMEA, and hopefully that gives you guys a flavour of my experience and background.
Cool, thank you. And what about you, Paul?
Yeah, it's always hard to tell the story of how I ended up where I am, because it's almost serendipity has taken control of it. But the grounding of my journey, I suppose, was for me, whether I'm fortunate or unfortunate, you tell me, but I was brought up or raised or dragged up, whatever you want to say, in Coventry, which is the most inland city in the UK. And my rule of thumb was how best to escape that location was to join the Royal Navy. And it was something that my grandfather was in World War II. It was something that I was really interested in. It was something I was in the Sea Cadets when I was, a teenager. So I naturally sort of fell into the Royal Navy, applied for the Royal Navy, and I specialised in intelligence, obviously naval intelligence. I did a degree in international relations and strategic studies, did naval intelligence for a few years, did a couple of in-service degrees, master's degrees as well, which really helped in broadening my horizon in terrorism studies and also in intelligence, international security, and putting the academic wrapper around what I was doing in my professional life. And then left. So I spent 8 years in the Royal Navy in total, 4 years in the British Army, because Afghanistan happened and the need for naval intelligence in the landlocked country was slightly limited. And there in the Army, I specialised in counterintelligence, and that's basically the protection of material, personnel, and information. So when I was looking to leave, because I had a young family and we were northern based, and I always bang the drum of everything's not always in London, with diversification and with the relocation of places like Channel 4 and it's part of the London Stock Exchange and the BBC, I live in just south of Manchester, so I was really keen to stay in the regions, as it were. And I naturally sat down next to a person at a party I've never met before and told them about my experience and my background and what I was looking to do and how I was getting out of the army. And he said, "Have you thought about KPMG?" And I said, "I'm not an accountant," was my immediate response, because it's an accountancy firm first and foremost. But with the breadth and depth of that organisation, they had a practice called Information Protection and Business Resilience. And I slipped into that quite nicely. If you squinted, it looked and felt and smelled like counterintelligence, which was cool. So I went and did that. So I spent 3 years at KPMG, so that's in professional services. The highlight of which was being the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at TalkTalk, which was a massive breach back in 2015. And the chief exec, who is Dame Dido Harding, is currently probably on screen only earlier talking about trace for the NHS. So that was a really insightful experience there, to be post-breach in the crisis, in the fog of war, trying to recover the organisation. So I spent 3 years at KPMG and then moved over to Deloitte, another big four, so another one of the large accountancy firms that had a cyber practice, to try and grow their regional practice in Manchester again. And there I was plucked from obscurity to become the Chief Operating Officer. So that is running the business, running the numbers, making sure headcount was correct, making sure our go-to-market approach was correct, and such like. Running a £56 million business, with the correct support and guidance and an opportunity to learn and develop as an individual was really important. I then moved to a company. I sound quite flighty, but there's a reason why I leave these places. And I went to a company called NCC Group, which is a Manchester-based global cybersecurity company. And I was the head of delivery for our cyber risk practice there. So making sure that what we were delivering to our clients was good, of the highest quality, we were adding value, that everybody was happy, we were oscillating, we were moving things forward. As the cyber threat landscape constantly evolves, we have to constantly evolve and make sure that we're giving our client base the right answers and the ground truth of what is happening. And then I left there in early this year to join FTI on the basis that I met my girlfriend there. And so it was a slightly boring, laborious chats in the evening about how work was. And she was in sales and I was in delivery, and never the twain shall meet. So I naturally left and joined FTI, where I'm here helping, a very embryonic team growing out massively across Europe, Middle East, India, and Africa.
Ah, cool. So can you tell us a little bit more about your team? Because there's so many different areas if we're looking from what you do to what Ollie does in the team. So between you, and I don't know how that's going to work, but could you tell us a bit more about what the team actually does day to day, and how it supports, and how you support your clients, and different roles within the team?
Yeah, sure. So we are delivery. We do a lot of business development. We do cradle to grave. A lot of organizations split their sales function from their delivery function, and occasionally that doesn't work very well, because people want to buy from people who've got the war wounds and the experience and can add insight, rather than just being yet another salesperson. So to have somebody technical in the room talking to a technical person, or having somebody in the room who's got technical expertise who can translate that into a non-technical jargon for people like the chief executive officer or the chief financial officer of an organization is hugely important. And that's where the team are at the moment. So as we grow, we are pretty, I would say we are quite top heavy, because we're trying to magnetize talent. And in this cybersecurity space, and in the tech space, and in the IT space, certainly, there is such a demand upon talent that it is hugely important to make sure that if people land somewhere, they've got a career path, they've got guidance, they've got support, and they've got somebody they can learn from, rather than just being given a spoon-fed task time after time. And that's what we try to develop out in FTI. So we've got 2 partners. We've got 2 managing directors, myself and the chief operating officer. And then we've got 2 directors, a marketing team, a senior director joining fairly soon, a senior consultant joining fairly soon. And that's where we are at the moment. And we are, looking at the recruitment pool to get the creme de la creme, to get those people in who can fit as part of our journey and their journey collectively. So it's not just as utilizing them to the nth degree. It's a two-way journey, and it's a, is it the right thing that they land here and that we can support and protect them and give them the right learning and development opportunities in this organization. So when we go and speak to our clients, it's a very, it's a frank conversation. We've got the experience to, message the conversation accordingly, to say, we've seen this before. I've seen this at organisations like TalkTalk. I've seen this at organisations like BP or Shell or Vodafone. It feels and looks the same because I've got the experience. And then we win the work and deliver the work. And the only way in which to have those war stories and that empirical evidence to support the message you're giving to these large-scale clients is to do it. But how do you win the work without having done it? You've got to have done it somewhere else before, or be innovative or different in delivering that. So that's what we offer, and that's the sort of the premise of mentoring, supporting, developing our more junior grades. And also we promote on a meritocracy. Absolutely, it's not a time served organisation. It's if we've recruited you and you are if your nomenclature of the title you hold is not beholden to your talent, your skill set, your output, there are opportunities for us to lever the changes in that and make sure that you are recognised and for your efforts going forward. Cool. Does that help? Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Well, it does kind of. I might go to Ollie because he obviously markets your team, and this is quite interesting because what you've told us very much is like what you're looking for people and the kind of the roles within the team. But I'm also quite interested to know, so once you've got your brilliant team and you're selling it to clients, what you're actually physically doing for them. So if they have, what is the work that you're doing for them? So
that makes sense. Yeah. So I guess, the way to look at cyber is it's not, and we were kind of talking about this just before we started, and it's not all necessarily coding and very technical stuff. Okay, so we will help organizations build cybersecurity resilience. So the aspiration that we're working towards is to help organizations respond to incidents. So if they've had a breach, we can go in there, we can run some forensic investigations, look under the hood of the engine as such and see what's gone on to try and fix that, work out where the malicious actor has kind of gained access.
And what kind of example, can you give us an example of a breach for, within an organization, like when they've had a breach, what would happen?
I think Paul's probably best placed to talk through that one, given maybe TalkTalk would probably be the best example.
Okay, well, let's hold that and come back to that. Yeah. So carry on, I stopped you, sorry.
Okay, yeah. So there's a combination of work. So there's a proactive work. So an organization, for example, might, it might be growing rapidly. It might be moving into new markets. It might be acquiring different businesses. And, we can help that organization improve its cybersecurity posture. So imagine you're kind of in the private equity space and you're looking to purchase another organization. Because of the general data protection regulation, which came in a couple of years ago now, the GDPR, if you buy another company and they've got an issue with cybersecurity, they have a breach, you're going to be liable, you're going to pay that fine, and you're going to have a huge reputational issue. So cybersecurity is a huge, huge business consideration. So we can do a load of proactive work to identify where the vulnerabilities are and look at and advise that organization where they need to invest and what they need to do culturally and kind of from a transformational perspective to remain secure. So another good example would be just this week we're seeing, and it's in the news if anyone wants to Google it. So Honda were kind of taken down by a ransomware attack. And that's come from a threat actor group called, and a strain of ransomware called Snake. And this is kind of playing havoc at the moment off the back of COVID-19. And ransomware can literally just bring an organization to its knees. Systems can shut down, people can't log on, the computers are completely locked, they cannot trade, and the threat actors will often make demands for huge amounts of money, which they're normally after in cryptocurrency, to be paid in order to unlock the system. So it's it's like the Wild West. What's going on out there is crazy. And another big breach recently would be EasyJet. So that one was in the press a few weeks ago, but it actually happened back in January. And I think, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, it's something like, was it 7 million records were breached, something like that?
That they know of, yeah. Which
That
is
they
always
know
an
of.
issue.
So, you've got to think about, your personal data. And I think people are becoming more aware now of their personal data. And these organizations have a duty to protect that. And with EasyJet, you can see that actually took place in January. They've had to flag it. The Information Commissioner, they've had to do all the work to try and understand what happened, because initially they probably had no idea, and they've only just gone public recently. So it's a really, really interesting world, because it's always changing, and these threat actors can take down the organization, almost at a push of a button, which is absolutely incredible.
Wow. And I suppose, Paul, at the moment, because everyone's gone even so much more online, do you think the threats have got even larger recently over COVID? Are you guys a lot busier, Paul?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of there's naturally more email traffic of people, as people aren't having face-to-face meetings or Zoom meetings or whatever mode, mechanism you want to have an online meeting. So we are seeing a lot of business email compromises. We're seeing people threat actors chancing their arm and doing phishing emails, so targeting senior people in large companies to sort of spoof how they would write an email to release funds, and and
that happened to my husband last week.
Really?
Yeah, they spoofed him so much to work out. My husband is an architect, and he runs his own practice, and they spoofed it so much they were able to take 3 different people in the organization and sound like each other to get them to move funds between business accounts.
Yeah. And a lot of that time as well, it's automated.
Okay.
It's not even a person who's sitting at the end of the interface, i.e. the keyboard, doing it. Often they can automate it and pick up keywords, key phrases, key sort of like cadence of words, and really emulate that individual. So we're seeing a lot of attacks in that space, and also it's a really small investment for an attack actor of that nature. They don't have to invest a lot, especially if it's automated and it's all coded. They can basically run a program and chance their arm and hit 200 organizations in a minute and see what happens. Whereas old school would be they'd sit in your network and observe and watch almost minute by minute, and that's a bit of a long-term plan. So we're seeing way more business email compromises, i.e. people spoofing. We're seeing phishing attacks, i.e. people just chancing their arms, going in and trying to emulate those individuals. And we're also seeing just a lot of traffic in terms of email traffic that goes across that can have payloads in, i.e. can have attachments that aren't correct, that have virus payloads that can then go onto the system. They don't have to do anything there and then, but what they can do is in 6, 12, 9 months or 9 years, whatever it may be, then come home to roost. So we're just seeing that people need to be way more aware of these threat actors and what actually it is. It can't be a here and now always, but what is it? If it looks wrong and feels wrong, just be inquisitive about going, it feels not quite right, so we need to do something about it.
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that, as Paul said, these malicious actors will adapt their techniques to the current environment. So if you take COVID at the moment, and you take organizations in the life sciences or pharmaceutical space, they've suddenly become, hot targets, because they could be potentially developing a vaccine for COVID. And if someone's got that IP, that could be very valuable. So there's actually been a notice issued by the NCSC, which is the National Cybersecurity Centre, part of the government, and they've actually issued a notice for organisations operating in that space to say that you're at a current high risk of attack. So it's fascinating. It moves.
Really
it drives so much of the news right now.
And I'm sure everybody be interested to hear a little bit more, Paul, about the case study of Talk, because that obviously was in the news and it was a big thing at the time. And it would be really interesting to know how you dealt with that as a security breach.
Yeah, so I was seconded in there from KPMG, on request by name from PwC, which is quite an odd thing to be done. But it's because it was a northern organisation. It's Manchester based. I was Manchester based. One of the PwC partners who knew me knew that I was local, knew I had experience in that space. So I went in there on day 2, and it was I can only say it was like the fog of war. And for those who obviously, it was 5 years ago, but it's still talked about to this day about how best not to respond to an incident. I don't think that's because of me and my time there, but certainly it's just an issue to look at, because Talk as an organisation have had certain really good structure, really good organisation, really good business model, and they were forecasting out for next generation technology rather than looking at legacy tail. So it was actually 2 youngsters who over in Northern Ireland who who basically found a vulnerability that was older than them, and that just goes to show that when people don't secure their legacy tail, and they're looking at the future. Looking at the future is well and good, but you've got to have the holistic picture of cybersecurity as an organisation. You can't just think of the future. You've got to also think about what's gone before. And because I think we mentioned earlier, it's companies built on acquisitions and mergers adopt old technologies or different technologies. And when you've got a Duplo brick and then you've got a Lego brick, the 2 are made by the same company but don't fit together. So it's quite interesting to see how you can best do that. So going in there, it was the fog of war, and obviously if anyone smells blood in terms of the threat actors, they all come after you just to exercise, just to flex their muscle and see and educate and inform and develop their skills. And we had to investigate everything that was going wrong there. Everything that we were notified about was investigated to the nth degree to make sure it wasn't true. And there was a lot of false there was a lot of red herrings in there. There was a lot of time and energy spent investigating those processes. But what we had to do was basically secure the customer base, because the customers were getting their information had been lost. There's also nefarious actors ringing them up, pretending to be Talk, knowing that they were a customer of Talk, to then ask in the right sort of like in a scripted way to say, can you give us your bank details? Can you do this, that, and the other? So our only effort was to secure our customers, or to secure the Talk customers back in the day. And it was also to say to the board, how do you secure yourself going forward? You haven't thought about the legacy before. Why was that? And look at the root cause of how it happened, why it happened, and how not to let it happen in the future. Because you'll always, as you develop new technologies, you'll always have a legacy tail. Maybe not as long, but you'll always have a legacy tail. So it was a really interesting time. Frenetic, long hours, chaos, directionless at times, but it's because he's fighting fires as well as trying to move forwards as well and forecast what's next. So it's a really, really interesting time, and it's still used as a case study today.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, just coming back and thinking about our students listening, and I remember a few years ago, I've always worked in the event industry, and we organised the PwC Cyber Security Challenge, and this, I think, was for PwC to work out those kind of absolute gurus within this role, and people who could crack codes and work computers and everything. And I know you guys, I can see Ollie, you're smiling there. And this is obviously a way in, I should imagine, for aspiring cybersecurity people to get into the environment. Would Ollie, you were smiling there, so I'll ask you about that. Can you tell us a bit about these challenges at all, or like what people are looking for in people like that to get into the industry? I mean, either of you can answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key point is you don't need to be purist technical, kind of sitting there on a computer, kind of geeking out all day. If you do that, that's fantastic. And there are urban myths, and I know this is being recorded, so I can't say too much as to what is true or not true. But the urban myths that certain firms, if you're a technical specialist, will just give you a piece of malware and say, if you can reverse engineer that, you've got a job. And that's the only criteria. So if you're a technical person, you're technically strong, it's likely that you're going to have and make connections through social media, and also attend lots of different events. So within the cybersecurity world, you've got something called DEF CON, which is out in Las Vegas, which is one of the biggest kind of events going. For that, you can't even pre-register. It's just cash on the door, no questions asked. So they don't know who's actually there, as some of these people have very interesting backgrounds. And there's one that's actually in the UK called Black Hat, which takes place, and that's again a huge cybersecurity event where people can network, kind of geek out together, share their skill set. But if you're not a technical person, that's not a bad thing, because a lot of cybersecurity and a lot of the issues actually stem from humans and behaviors. So you don't necessarily need to have a degree in information security or cybersecurity or whatever it might be. There are a broad number of skill sets required, and some of the strongest people that I've worked with in the cybersecurity world are not qualified in cybersecurity, if that makes sense. They're just able to ask the right questions. They have an understanding of the risks and the threats out there, and they're able to make informed recommendations. So I'd urge anyone that's wanting to find out more about cybersecurity to, get themselves onto LinkedIn, get a profile built there, start to follow some different organizations to understand what they're posting. So we mentioned NCSC, National Cybersecurity Center. They post a lot of content. And the other organization that I'd encourage you guys to take a look at is the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum have a cybersecurity center, and again, they post a hell of a lot of updates and blogs on some of the trends and issues going on in the marketplace, and it will give you just a great understanding of what we're seeing and some of the things that we talked about today.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. And so, what if you guys were going to ask Paul this? If you were going to employ somebody into your team, what would you be looking for in that person, do you think? And obviously there are lots of different roles, but what kind of characteristics do you think you're looking for, make someone stand out to you?
Yeah, I think it's energy and inquisitive nature, a desire. We don't wake up in the morning and sit joyously at our laptops or in client meetings from 9 till whatever time. For the love of it purely, you have to be really interested in cybersecurity, in the broader piece. Read around the subject. Be on the front foot. Be forward leaning in your thought process. I think that's really important. I think that's the thing. And energy, I think, is the key thing. And also be true to yourself as well. If you can bring a personality to the table as well, I think that's really important, and not force yourself to fit into the mold of what you think it is. I think it's really, really, really important to be true to yourself, and then you will flourish from there.
Yeah, and I just add to that, we're actually, in recruitment processes at the moment, and the first stage interview is actually with myself and with Kate, who's our COO. So both Kate and myself are non-technical. We can't code, we can't do any of that really sexy, interesting stuff. But that first round of interview is very much about, as Paul said, the fit, the individual's aspirations, their sense of motivation, and for us to understand whether we believe they will gel with the team, because that's so important.
That's great. And would you say that 9 times out of 10 people coming into your team come from a graduate area, from having done a degree?
I would say they do, but I try not to focus too much on that. And I know there's many organizations out there now that are trying to find ways to not focus on that and focus more on the individual skills. So as Paul said, Paul mentioned personality is important, and I'm a believer, and as a marketeer, I'm a believer in always considering your audience. So if you're going in for an interview, just consider the fact that the person doing the interview has probably got 6 or 7 interviews on that day, back to back. They're super busy. It's quite draining actually doing interviews as well as hosting the interview as well as going as a candidate. And what can you do as a candidate to stand out in a good way, be memorable? And I think those things matter, because if you can just say, oh yeah, that was the lady that did this or had that, at the end of the day, that could be the memorable thing that sticks with the person doing the interview.
Yeah, and I suppose you've spoken about LinkedIn and people getting LinkedIn profiles, which is really important. But on the same note, and I know you guys agree with me, a bit of advice would be in interviews to make sure that you've gone onto LinkedIn and looked up, and that the interviewee has gone in and looked at the interviewer, so they know more about you, for example, and what you do. I mean, that's a card.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Always have a question, always have a question. And, if you could go to an interview and say, to Paul, oh, I noticed you were in the Royal Navy. Can you tell me a bit more about that? That's instantly quite flattering and also then more memorable for the individual hosting the interview. So always try and put yourself in the other person's shoes. That would be my advice.
And CV wise, I mean, it's very funny listening to different people. Like, somebody told us last week that he put his CV on blue paper, thinking that at least when they went through it would be different. But I mean, how much information do you guys need on CVs?
I think, again, Paul might have a different view to me, and this is me being the kind of, visual marketing guy. My CV's on one page, on one side of A4. And again, think about the individuals reading your CVs. Get 50 applicants for a job, and we've got to go through those CVs, and you send in a 6-7 page CV, you're just not going to read it. You're just absolutely not going to read it. So I would encourage everyone to really consider their CV format. There's loads of websites out there where you can actually buy templates for a very, very small fee. That's something I did, and then dropped my CV into a very fancy, almost Photoshop looking template, and it works well. And I would really encourage everyone just to whittle it down to the important things that you want to land, the experiences you've got that are relevant, but also to give a sense of who you are as a person and what motivates you.
Brilliant, thank you. So David Maxwell has asked, looking forward, how do you see cybercrime evolving, and how do you plan to keep on top of that? So Paul, should I go for you on that one?
Yeah, sure. Well, we're always evolving as the threat landscape evolves as well. So it's just, it's being front-footed. It's we've got so many different sources and agencies who are reporting on cybercrime and the various groups. That Snake, for instance, who did the recent ransomware on Honda. One of our partners back in the day, technical hands-on, was dealing directly with that threat actor. So it just goes to show that that experience and that skill set can be brought to bear 5 whenever years later. So it's a constant battle to be evolving. Not only are we evolving to the client questions, but it's the threat landscape that we are evolving to. So we are almost operating in a red team environment, as it were. We are operating as the nefarious actors to see what they would do next. What would you do if you're a bad guy? So that's where, or about bad organization, and what would you do and why, and who you're going to target. So then we can forecast out. With COVID-19, like Ollie says, the targeting of pharmaceutical companies as they do the research into possible medicines to help people through this period is massive because of the intellectual property in those organizations. So how would I attack a pharmaceutical organization? I would do it this way. What else would I do? Possibly this. And just thinking really left field as well. And then going to board members, and this is how we sell our business best, is by going, and this is what I would do, and really disrupting them. Because they're thinking binary, we're trying to move them out into a wider, a funnel of wider understanding and wider awareness, I suppose, of what the threat actors are, what they can do, and what they're after. Because they'll stop at nothing. And if they can automate certain things, that's great. but you've constantly got to adopt your security profile to adapt to that sort of threat landscape. So always on the move. They'll always be on the move. We're always on the move. And as technologies evolve, and we're going into quantum technologies now, more and more so, it's a different level of security needed. Internet of Things, we've gone from industrial control systems and SCADA, which is obviously like plant security, as in industrial plants, to more of a Internet of Things. Like the Graphene Institute in Manchester, for instance, was attacked. And they attacked the air conditioning unit and increased the temperature too high. So according to EU law, people couldn't work in that building anymore. So that gave another nation a competitive advantage, because nobody in that building could go in there because they couldn't work there because the temperature was too high. It's those sort of things that we're constantly adapting to and understanding, going, if I was going to really see these people off, how would I do it? And I'll do it this way, and this is how you would stop that from happening. So you've got to be front-footed is how you do it. But good question. But yeah. Evolving always is the answer.
You share, because obviously you are in an environment that you are trying to sell FDI against other companies, but do you share best practice between you?
In terms of companies?
Well, in terms of if you find something, in terms of
so
security space, you're gonna, I mean, for one step, you as a company want to be more ahead of the game, so people obviously are going to choose you. But on the other side, this is a big threat. So if you find these threats, you need to share the
there's within the cybersecurity market, there's an awful lot of research published, and research is being published all the time on the latest vulnerabilities and threats that are out there. Some companies will offer bounties to hackers and say, we'll give you $100,000 if you can find a hole in this, and they'll pay it. And people make a living doing that because they need to test these systems before they go public. And the other thing to consider, and I think it's a good point, Naomi, is around working closely together. And I think, with the COVID environment, we are seeing now that the geopolitical landscape is changing and evolving, and we're seeing nation state activity. We can't, you're recording this, so I'm not going to mention anything in particular, but that type of activity over a period of time is just going to build walls up as such, and that's going to make it more difficult to keep environments secure. Arguably, all of the good guys do need to work together to share information, to share vulnerabilities, and to ensure that resilience is built on a global level, but that's easier said than done.
I was quite fascinated when you said about just now, Paul, about the aircon system, and I was wondering, and what you just said now, Ollie, and this is just as an aside, but what is the kind of percentage of more kind of national based kind of crime, like people maybe coming governmental based, to like hackers in a small environment trying to get money? I mean, what do you think what is the kind of percentage in that?
I don't know if Paul has a set percentage. I think it could be quite a hard answer.
Yeah, I think a percentage is the wrong way to question it, because a lot of these threat actors they've got a certain moral compass, which might be different to what we would perceive as a decent moral compass, etc. But they all add to a nation state's approach, I suppose. Like Anonymous have just come back recently. Who does that help ultimately? Well, it's not the West, it's more of a nation states. So they don't need to be assigned to a nation to have demonstrable impact upon organizations. Mm-hmm. It's and people offload it, people pay different organizations, people do it for certain reasons, and at the end of the day, and again I keep on saying people, you've got to realize it's people at the end of the day who are doing it. It's not just some sort of like Skynet mentality of it's all automated, it's all done by some ones and zeros machine. It's a person ultimately who sets something up and drives it forward. So we've always got to be that way. So I don't think you can give a specific number, but on nation states. But nation states have their vested interests, and but so do organisations, and so do criminal gangs, and so do individuals, even if just to to refine their skill sets.
No, cool.
And just to add to that, you will see, Paul mentioned that insiders and insider threats. Most breaches, and I think the majority of breaches, a stat that I've worked with previously was around 62% start with insiders. Whether that's someone malicious or whether that's just someone being, irresponsible and leaving their laptop unlocked in Starbucks and it's stolen. But, you will see on the dark web postings going out saying, hey, does anyone work at X bank? If you do, we're going to pay you lots of money if you can provide us with access to X, Y, and Z. And that goes on. That's how people get recruited. So it's a fascinating world.